So getting a little bit more specific here, for me it's still a matter of narrative technique, and the question is this: is humour appropriate in mainstream epic fantasy? I'm going to assume that you know, or you've got a good idea of what is meant by epic fantasy, and you've got a good idea of what is meant by mainstream. Most people, when they say epic fantasy, what they mean is it's really long, and that there are battles as well as quests, that there is political intrigue as well as quests, that there are whole countries to save, as well as just princes and princesses to save one another, which is how it works nowadays, incidentally. We've got way beyond princesses passively stuck in towers with waving handkerchiefs out of the window and hoping that brave princes are going to rescue them. A lot of the time the shoe is very much on the other foot, and it's either the princesses resourcefully rescuing themselves, or in fact rescuing princes, who are usually doing everything wrong. And don't get me wrong, I think that's fantastic. That's a great way for epic fantasy to go. From my point of view, what epic means is that the consequences of what happens in the story can potentially affect a whole nation or a whole continent or a whole country. So the consequences are not personal, the consequences are public. That's what makes it epic. Anyway, this is a question about, can you use humour? Is humour appropriate to fantasy written on that scale? And this is what I have to say about it. There is a style called comic fantasy. Have I mentioned tractors? There are also tractors. It's the moisson at the moment. Actually, we're coming to the end of the moisson, but there are still some crops being harvested, and so I've got tractors going on. There's a massive silo just over there, about 600-700 meters that way. I'm sorry, I don't do 19th century units, so I can't tell you what that is in yards. Okay, 19th century or American units. No, USA units. Anyway, it's just over there. And if you couldn't hear me there, don't worry. Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of daft, isn't it? If there is loud noise, there will be subtitles. Sure, I've already said that. It's just nice to be outside, you know. There is a style called comic fantasy. Its main intent is to raise laughs. As with anything whose main intent is to raise a laugh, it's rarely any good. One author who is often mistaken for a writer of comic fantasy by people who've never read his books is Terry Pratchett. When his books are funny, it is intentional. However, his main purpose is not to make you laugh, it's to make you think. To raise your consciousness and your mindfulness of the world and society around you. And to make you aware of the consequences of your actions, the way that your actions have consequences in the world around you. If you have read and enjoyed his books and you didn't realise that that was his true intent, that's one of the proofs that he was a great writer. Register is what we call the overall tone or pitch or character of the narrative itself. Some people describe register as the sort of person or the personality of the narrator. Readers don't like it when register changes too frequently or too violently. A narrative voice that is sometimes grave, epic and sonorous, and at other times colloquial, chatty and jokey, can work, but doesn't work if those changes take place within an individual scene or passage. Readers will feel that this breaks the immersion or throws them out of the story. But don't forget, funny things happen in real life. People do dumb stuff. Inconsequential or harmless accidents happen, and the onlookers often laugh about it. People stumble over their words, as I'm sure you've noticed. People make what we call Freudian slips. Some situations are both funny and not funny, depending on whose point of view you sympathise with. So there's no reason why epic fantasy should be relentlessly worthy and serious. But it helps if you can differentiate between describing a comical situation to the reader and just trying to make the reader laugh. The word I'd focus on in the question is add. Should you add humour? I don't think so. But if something happens that is, or might be funny, don't be afraid to tell the reader about it. And don't be afraid to tell the reader about it in a way that will make them laugh.